no matter how good I might be, never going to be good enough where I could even begin to merit my own salvation. Us as sinners we are everything that God is not, and so it'd be like we're offering up to him a shiny, polished turd and say, accept this as the means of our salvation. And
pistols, prayer, and potluck. This is Armed Lutheran Radio.
Hi folks, welcome to Armed Lutheran Radio, a show about guns, hunting, competitive shooting, the natural right of self-defense, and what God's Word says about the issues surrounding gun rights and gun ownership. I'm your host, Lloyd Bailey, the Armed Lutheran, and this is episode number 282. Thank you so much for making Armed Lutheran Radio a part of your week again this week. And welcome to all of those of you who are new to the show, just discovering it for the first time. I hope you enjoy what you hear. And I hope you will stick around, come back for more. Check out the back catalog. Visit us again next week. See what else we have up our sleeves. Normally, this would be our variety show week. But unfortunately, there's not a lot of variety this week. Pastor Bennett has a couple of funerals. So I hope you will keep him and his congregation in your prayers. And Mia is out of town, so she was not going to be able to join us this week. So we will save an excellent tip from Sergeant Bill for our next episode in 2 weeks, episode 284. Before I get started, it's going to be kind of a short episode. It's going to be kind of a different episode, but I do want to, before I get into today's content, I do want to give a shout out to the men and women who make this show possible, the members of the Reformation Gun Club. And this week I want to recognize our awesome friends, Greg from Holly, Michigan, Kevin from Marion, Iowa, Melvin from Holt, Missouri, Robert from Monroe, Georgia, Richard from Pagosa Springs, Colorado, and Steve from Grovetown, Georgia. Thank you all so much for your support. And to all the members of the Reformation Gun Club, thank you so much. We are a listener-funded podcast. That means we don't have any advertising. We don't have any sponsors. We rely on good people like those I just mentioned and many more to help us keep going and pay the bills. For as little as $1 a month, you can join them, help support the show, and get some great benefits as well, including early access to the show, invitations to our monthly online hangouts, hundreds of hours of exclusive content on our member website, and much more. Visit armedlutheran.us/gun club. If you would like to find out more. Hope you will come and join us and visit us for our next online hangout, which I think I'm going to try to do either next weekend or the week after. I need to look at the calendar and figure out a good date. We weren't able to do it due to some scheduling conflicts with my daughter's volleyball tournament, end of the season volleyball tournament. Kind of tripped things up for me in August. So maybe we'll try to do, maybe not. Oh boy, let's see. We're running up against it because the national championship, the IDPA national championship, is coming next weekend, which means Sergeant Bill will not be able to be with us. So we'll have to see when we can finagle that. So maybe next weekend, the 18th or the 19th, we'll have a look. So stay tuned for more information about our next online hangout. All right, like I said, today's going to be a little bit different. Don't have the cast with me today because Pastor Bennett has and Mia have other things to attend to. This is like the third time I've tried to record this episode. I've been trying to figure out what I wanted to say this. Well, there's so much been going on And on top of it all, of course, the 20th anniversary of 9/11, which took place yesterday. And after recording a couple of things, I decided really I needed to, I really, it was in my heart to talk about 9/11 today. Because I spent the day yesterday doing nothing but watching documentaries and remembrances and specials about the 20th anniversary. I did not watch any of the staged remembrance ceremonies and the speeches from the politicians and all of that. I went back and actually spent time watching the old footage, the old news footage from the day from 9/11, 2001. And was really, it brought back a lot of memories. You know, they say that every generation has that moment that everyone remembers, that sort of defines the generation. For my parents, that would have been the assassination of John F. Kennedy. For my grandparents, it would have been the attack on Pearl Harbor. For my generation, it was September 11th of 2001, the terrorist attack on New York, on the World Trade Center, the Twin Towers, the Pentagon, and Flight 93, which crashed in a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, and the nearly 3,000 people who died that day. For me, I remember exactly where I was, and I know many of you who are of my generation do as well. At the time, my son was 1. No, wait a minute. He was 1. And my wife was still a school counselor at the time. So she was at work. My son was at home with my mother, who was keeping him while I was going back to school to get I decided to, as I mentioned in a previous episode, in one of the Ask the Armed Lutherans episodes, we talked about how we got to where we are. And so, I, at that time, was going back to college to get a degree in computer programming. And so I was going to school during the day, working at night. And, I got to class. Don't remember what class it was. I think it was one of the programming languages that that nobody uses anymore. And nobody was doing anything. The TVs were on in every classroom, and everyone was sitting and watching the news. And I sat there and watched the first tower burning, and then saw the plane hit the second tower, and that was it. Nobody moved. I mean, obviously people were stunned and they were reacting to what they saw on television, but there wasn't even an attempt or an explanation for what we were going to do that day. It was just everybody sat and watched, glued to the television. And then at some point, the instructor, the professor said, just go on home, be with your families. So that day is burned into my memory, just like it is so many others. And watching those old news footage from CNN and from other morning shows from that morning, the same ones that I saw back then 20 years ago, it brought back a lot of a lot of memories, but a lot of things stood out that at the time wouldn't have registered. Interesting how much has changed in 20 years. The first thing that struck me in watching those videos was how little we knew that morning. And compared to the 24-hour news cycle of today, social media and all the rest, they spent, after the first plane had hit the World Trade Center, they spent a good portion of the time trying to figure out what was going on. And there was so much confusion, which today would have been unthinkable. Mainly because today you would have had stuff posted on Twitter within minutes. You would have had videos posted on YouTube almost instantaneously. You know, there's that iconic video clip of the first plane screaming into the Twin Towers, very low overhead. It's an amazing piece of footage. We didn't see that for days back then. Today, we would have seen that instantaneously. And it was interesting listening to, you know, watching the footage of the Twin Towers, and there's only one camera angle. And the announcer, the anchor is actually, here's Bryant Gumbel, right? He is talking, for those of you who actually know who Bryant Gumbel is, for those of you who are too young to know, don't worry about it. But he's actually talking to people on the phone to get eyewitness accounts. And of course, there's proof positive just listening, just watching that footage, just how unreliable firsthand or, you know, man on the street eyewitness accounts are. You know, we talk about that when it comes to jury trials and how reliable are eyewitness accounts. And generally they're not very reliable. And here was just proof positive, because people are just saying some of really weird things that today you would be like, how, you know, I was sitting here watching it, but if you had seen this footage for the first time, knowing what you know now about what happened on that day, and had never seen that footage before, you'd be amazed at what are these idiots talking about? He's interviewing people who on the phone, and this wasn't just Bryant Gumbel. CNN was doing it, and another station was doing it. Their morning show was doing it, and they were just trying to call people on the phone who were on the street who had a firsthand view of it. Because at the time, I know it's unthinkable now, but the news didn't have any footage of what actually struck the tower the first time. And they're sitting there speculating about, was it a plane? Was it a small, we think it was a small prop plane, a twin engine. Oh, it might have been a Cessna. Oh, and then somebody else, there were rumors that it was a missile. Or maybe that was the second one, because maybe somebody they got somebody on the phone and, tell us what you saw. Oh, well, I didn't see anything. I just heard something. And they looked up and they saw the fireball. And so that's all they really had to go on. Today, with the news media the way it is and social media the way it is, we would know within moments, and people would be making all kinds of crazy speculations. We see this all the time with gun violence incidents, where all the speculation runs wild. And today, they're doing all the speculation with tons and tons of information. Back then, they were speculating about what was going on with almost no information, except for firsthand eyewitness accounts reported to them by phone by the man on the street with one camera angle. And the reason I keep stressing this camera angle thing, at one point, and I think it was the CNN, I believe it was the CNN coverage, at one point they had one single camera angle of the Twin Towers. The South Tower, which was hit second, was beyond the North Tower. And you could kind of see it sticking out from behind the North Tower in the background. And when the second tower collapsed, or when the South Tower collapsed, all they were talking about was they thought it was an explosion, and they couldn't see the tower because of all the smoke. But they only had one camera angle. And when the second plane hit the South Tower, they actually thought, and somebody on the street, because they didn't see the plane, because the plane came in from the other side of the building, all they had were these firsthand accounts from down on the street, people who didn't actually see it from the air. And they were all reporting their weird points of view. And for a good 5-6 minutes, even though they had it on film, they thought that the second plane hitting the South Tower was an explosion from the first crash. They were still trying to figure out, and they still couldn't wrap their heads around that it might be terrorism. They couldn't even figure out that there were two planes for a while, because of how different the news media was back then. I'm not saying they were better ideologically. What I'm saying is how technology has changed the way news is gathered and disseminated has changed so drastically in 20 years. Today, if there were an attack like this, we would know within minutes exactly what happened, and we would probably have 15 different angles from cell phone videos that people had posted either on Twitter or on Facebook or on YouTube or all three. Back then, they had one camera angle and eyewitness people that they were getting on the phone, not on camera, on the phone. It was a weird, it was a weird kind of flashback to and to sit there and think about just how much has changed. But is it better? Right? I mean, we have better means of news gathering and dissemination thanks to all the new technology. But does it really do us any good? Because like I said earlier, think about all the times that we've had some sort of a terrorist attack, or we've had a school shooting or a church shooting or something like this. And we have all this information, tons of it at our disposal within moments of the actual incident. And yet we routinely get the news wrong for days and sometimes weeks after the incident. Now, watching that news footage from 20 years ago, yeah, they got it wrong initially, but it wasn't long before they figured it out. It was within the hour they had kind of figured out what was going on. They had rewound and zoomed in and talked to experts, and they'd figured out what was going on. And how often today, with all the technology that we've got, do they get it completely wrong? The other thing that came to mind in listening to and watching interviews with survivors and their families and first responders, firefighters and policemen and construction workers, and the wives and husbands and parents of those who perished that day. Because watching all of this made me think, we use this term and everybody posts it. They put it on social media and they say things like, never forget, right? And something that we need to keep in mind when we say the words never forget, the question we need to ask is, how much have we already forgotten? Because if you go if you go to Google and you just do a search. What are the things that are trending? 2 of 20 things on the list that I have in front of me that I just pulled up, 2 of them have to do with 9/11. Kansas State's Skylar Thompson injury. Tori Spelling's husband, Dean McDermott. Charlie Sheen, Denise Richards' daughters, Dallas Cowboys, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Leah Messner, whoever that is, or Messer, God of War Ragnarok, DACA immigration, masks, Columbus, Ohio, Kylie Jenner, YouTube disabled puppy dancing. These are trending stories, trending searches for the date of the most heinous and horrible terrorist attack in American history, probably in world history. Have we already forgotten 9/11? We just withdrew our forces in the most horrifically screwed up and poorly planned manner possible from Afghanistan, the country where the 9/11 attackers hatched this plot and launched the 9/11 attacks, the country that harbored the terrorists who brought down the Twin Towers. And just last month, at the end of August, we handed Afghanistan back to the very people who are responsible for the horrors that we saw on September 11th, 20 years ago. So, as a nation, have we already forgotten? As much as we like to throw the term or that phrase around, never forget, I think we have. I don't think we're better for it. Never forget is not for those who lost loved ones. It's not for those who ran towards the burning buildings. Never forget is not for the survivors. It's not for the men and women who went off to fight evil overseas, because they can never forget. Never forget, that phrase is for us, for those of us who sat safe at home and watched in horror on television. Never forget is for your children, my children, our children who were not yet born, that we should make sure that they will remember. Is your school teaching your kids about 9/11? Do your kids understand 9/11? If they don't, if you're not sure the answer is yes, I would encourage you to go and find the news footage from the day that it happened and sit down and share with them what you remember about that day, where you were, and how it made you feel. Talk to them about the sacrifice, the bravery, the heroism, the patriotism, and make sure they understand the evil that we saw on that day 20 years ago. Tell them the story of Todd Beamer. Todd Beamer was a passenger on Flight 93, which ultimately crashed in a field outside of Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Todd and his fellow passengers decided, once they found out what was going on and that their plane was probably going to be used as a missile to attack Washington, D.C. somewhere, they decided they were going to fight back. And the last thing we know from Todd was a phone call that he made to, I think it was, I don't remember who it was. It was an operator, maybe in Chicago. I may be mixing that up, but it's not important. And he was trying to get information about what was going on. The last thing he did before he hung up the phone We know about the phrase, the last words that we heard from Todd Beamer. We know about it became a catchphrase. It became a rallying cry in the fight against terrorism. What you might not know is how right before, Todd and the rest of the passengers got up and rushed down the aisle to take on those terrorists, Todd asked that operator on the phone if she would pray with him. And they prayed the Lord's Prayer together. And then they recited the 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for thou art with me. God help me, Todd said. Jesus help me. And then he said to his fellow passengers, are you guys ready? Let's roll. Todd and the 39 other passengers and crew of Flight 93 were the first to fight back in the war, what would eventually be called the War on Terrorism. Tell your kids about Todd Beamer. And make sure they never forget. That's all I've got for today. Like I said, this was going to be a little different. But this was on my heart after spending the day reliving those events 20 years ago and thinking about where we were and what we were doing and what it felt like. Share those memories with your kids so that they never forget. Because I suspect, based on what happened in Afghanistan at the end of August, we're going to be going through something like this again. I just hope that we come together as a country like we did back then in the wake of that kind of tragedy. Let me know your thoughts. Love to hear where you were on September 11th, 2001. Leave me a message. Leave me a voicemail. Visit the feedback page at armedlutheran.us/feedback. And I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear your stories, your memories of 9/11, and how it impacted you and your family. Next week, episode 283, we will do our variety show. Until next time, God bless you all. Keep shooting. Keep praying. I'll talk to you next time.
For show notes, be sure to visit our website at www.armedlutheran.us. Check out the Facebook page, The Armed Lutheran, or join our Facebook group, Fans of Armed Lutheran Radio. If you like what you hear, please leave us a comment on our feedback page at armedlutheran.us/feedback or a review on iTunes and let us know what you think. Thank you for listening to Armed Lutheran Radio, a member of the Self-Defense Radio Network.